We are about to start our next session to learn how to stop messing our best ideas. To talk more about this very interesting subject, I'm excited to welcome on stage Adam Batten, Chief Currency Analyst at ForexLive. Please let's give him a warm welcome.
Okay, you know they changed the name of my presentation. It wasn't supposed to be messing up. I don't know if you've ever traded, but the word wasn't messing in there, but they wouldn't let me use the word I wanted to, which I'm sure if you've messed up a trade, you probably didn't say I messed up. But the idea of this presentation is it's really about conviction. Anyone who's accomplished anything in trading or in life really has had conviction in the idea or in the trade. And this is about trading successfully, and I believe that is the magic ingredient if you want to make money in financial markets, is holding that conviction and how to hold that conviction. You get into a trade, you have an idea, and something happens in the world or something changes in the trade and you get shaken out because fear is so much scarier than hope or optimism. And we're going to talk about how to stay in those trades, and how, if you can't have conviction, you're better off just buying an index fund. So this is about making money in markets, how you do it, how I do it, and how to overcome all the difficult pain of being in a trade. It's deeply unpleasant to have a profitable trade, to let a trade run. And this is about sort of overcoming that great idea, but you're right and you blow it. And that deep frustration that you can get in a trade like that. I'll talk about me first. I'm a co-founder of ForexLive. I've been trading for 20 years. I'll tell you about the very first trade I did, because there's something about the magic of being a trader and the very first trade that you did. And mine was buying the company IMAX. So if you've been to the movie theater, this is like the big screen IMAX company, and I believed that this company was going to do very well, that 3D movies were going to do very well. And this was like 5 years before the first Avatar. Anyway, I was very young and kind of put my whole account into that trade. And it was going well. Sony was going to buy it out. So Sony was poking around. They were going to buy out IMAX, and it looked good. And then they had an accounting scandal. The whole thing fell apart, fell 40% in a day. And all this conviction wasted and all this pain. And I was stupid and young and held it, and it fell another 30%. And you get, these lessons in markets. It's the most humbling, painful thing to lose money in markets, because it attacks your ego, it wrecks your conviction, and just shows you the different ways you can be wrong. And I started this company and traded macro and been wildly successful. The last 3 years, I make all my money trading. We get into more of that later, but it's funny, it came back around. It took about 15 years, but there was a lawsuit against IMAX because it was an accounting scandal. They had misrepresented things, and a class action suit that finally went through, and they actually paid back all the money they lost. So it took 15 years, but I ended up breaking even on that trade. But in terms of the conviction, first we're going to talk about how to be right, and then how to stay in that trade. And we're going to talk about a few different points. And I think this is the first one and the most important one. A lot of traders, they talk about what should happen in the market or what is the right thing in the world. But I think you all know that the world doesn't really work that way. It's deeply unfair in the world, and you have to trade what is going to happen, not what you think is going to happen. The rules don't apply equally to different countries. The US is wildly rich. It will bend the rules. The same rules don't apply to every country in the world. And you just can't fight that kind of thing with conviction. And if you want to be right and if you want to have conviction, it starts with a realistic view of what the world really is, or trading what will happen, not what you would like to happen. So that's sort of the first secret, and along with that, it's not to fight the Fed. And that's the only thing I'll really talk about with macro. It's a 20-minute presentation. I wish I had 2 hours to talk about understanding macro, or 2 days. And then along with that, your next step is to think about what's coming. And really the secret to that, they're all things you know already, is that you need to read. I mean, understanding the world comes from just reading, putting in the work, understanding people who And I'll tell you the first secret. A lot of times in financial markets, you'll have people who are very loud and they have conviction. They'll come on TV, they'll have a man with a square jaw and a deep voice, and he'll be very reassuring. And I know because I do this. And to get on TV or to be an influencer, you have to have pretend conviction. You go on TV, and I do this, and they say, well, what's going to happen with the Canadian dollar, Adam? Because I'm in Toronto. And I'll say, well, it's definitely going here. And here's why. Now, I know that there's a million things that can go wrong with that, but you don't get on TV by saying, well, maybe this, well, maybe that. But that's the reality of the world, and you have to be very careful to stay away from the people who are always overly confident, and you're trying to borrow their conviction. You really can't borrow someone else's conviction. You have to develop your own. So choose the things that you read wisely. People who will present both sides. You just can't get an idea from somebody else and believe in it without doing the work. And then you have to cultivate that even deeper. You have to challenge those ideas. If you're going to hold a trade and make a really, really strong trade that makes a lot of money, you have to have this deep conviction that comes from questioning, where can I go wrong? Read more, even find everything out that you can about that and really put in the work. But be careful about the sunk cost fallacy, which is, I spent so much time learning about this, I have to trade it, I have to invest in it. No, you don't. You have to be careful against that trap. And then keep asking, what if I'm wrong? How am I going to protect this trade? When will I know I'm wrong? What is really changed? And along with that is getting the timing right. So you have a trade, you know about a trade, don't expect to be on time. You're either going to be early or you're going to be late. And you have to decide, depending on who you are, do I want to be early on this trade that I want to bet on, this big idea, or can I wait till it goes in my direction? I've been early on so many trades. You can be 10 years early on a trade. Nuclear power is having a renaissance now. I thought that would happen 2 years after Fukushima in Japan. And it's been 10 years of waiting for it to finally come around. That's not a trade. It doesn't work. So maybe early doesn't work for you. I like to be early on trades, but there's nothing wrong with being late. But never assume that you're going to be right on time. So you're either going to have to take some pain at the start in waiting and being wrong, or you're going to miss out some of the upside at the beginning. But don't assume that you're going to get the timing right. The next is, there's conviction and there's position sizing. And accepting that there is going to be pain in whatever trade that you're in. It is deeply, deeply, deeply unpleasant making money in markets any way that you can. We think about profits, but you have to anticipate that pain. And that's the number one secret, is anticipating the future pain, the journey that you're going to be on, whether it's in real life or in markets. If you're going from one place to another, you are going to experience pain. And by visualizing that pain, understanding that that's going to be part of the process, you can maintain that conviction about what's coming and hold that trade for long enough. And you can't take too big a size. I mean, it depends on who you are and what you can tolerate, but position sizing, it's really the key. If you want to be early, you have to be early and small. If you want to wait, maybe you can size into a trade larger later, but you can't get the timing right, the position sizing right. Understand that that's what it takes to make money trading. Well, here are some of the traps, and they're the same traps that you see all the time. And the number one is that fear is more powerful than greed. You will have a conviction in a trade, but a bank will start failing in the US. There'll be people on TV telling you to be afraid. That's what sells. That's what gets on TV right now, or in Twitter, or to the top of your feed, is fear. The best trade idea in the history of the world is that everything's going to be okay. Everything is going to be fine. Nobody is coming on TV or in the media and saying everything's going to be fine. So that's really the secret when fear is coming at you, and it comes at you on your phone, on your TV, from your friends, from other traders, fear about anything that can go wrong, because there's always nuclear war. And the joke about trading nuclear war was, what do you trade? What's the trade when you hear that nuclear bombs have been launched? And people say, well, we'll sell everything. No, that's wrong. You buy everything, because if the nuclear bombs land, it doesn't matter anyway. And if they don't, if they weren't shot, you're going to make a lot of money on the rebound. So always try to fade that fear in financial markets, and be careful about tunnel vision and echo chambers. So much of our social media now reflects what you already believe. Now this can be really good with conviction. You saw these people in the Bitcoin, boom. It was just communities of everybody saying hodl, buy more, and it kind of reinforces that conviction. But ultimately, being right is what matters, and you have to strengthen your conviction to the level where you don't need an echo chamber to sustain it, because you have a deep, deep belief in it. But on the other hand, and we'll talk about a trade about tunnel vision. You can't have it just plain tunnel vision. And obviously the FOMO, and the last point about the FOMO is what's extremely painful is having an idea in markets. And you've all been there. I have a great idea, and then you miss it. You blow the trade somehow. And that just leads you down a spiraling path of making another bad trade or chasing it, sizing too large. What I often say to people, and it's my favorite saying in markets, is there's always another trade. You might wait 10 years for a trade and blow it, but there will be another trade. There is always another trade. And if you can tell yourself that and stay in the game, you're going to catch the next one. And you don't need to catch them all. You only need 5 or 6 big trades to make as much as you ever want. So stay in the game, avoid that FOMO, and repeat, okay, there is going to be another trade. I missed this one, it's very frustrating. But there is always another trade. Anyway, I did want to talk about sort of this tunnel vision and ignorance. And this was a trade, a guy I sat with. I used to work in this trading floor in Montreal in Canada. And it was a guy, and he didn't really want to know anything. He knew like the most basics of technical analysis. And it was this chart here is the Canadian dollar, dollar CAD. And he had one belief, and if it was that 114 broke, it was going to 130. And he had built up his account. I think he started with like $10,000 or $15,000 up. I think it was a $30,000 account, which was a decent account. He'd done kind of well. But I have one belief, and I have total conviction that this technical level is going to break, and it's going to 130. And he did it. He made $1 million on that trade. It was a young guy, straight up million, one trade, dollar CAD trade. And if you can see the chart here, there's a huge dip in the middle. That's like 800 pips top to bottom. And it didn't shake him out. What I've always admired about that trade was that he didn't take it off at 500,000, which most people would have done. He didn't take it off when it went from 700 back to 3. He maintained that conviction. And if you want to make a lot of money in markets, you have to have that, just this insane belief. Listen, that's not for me. I could never make that trade, and I admire the heck out of him. He ended up working at a hedge fund in New York. I don't know how he did after that, because I think it was pretty insane the way he trades. But that is the sort of conviction you need to have to make $1 million in trading. It was a very fascinating one, that kind of ignorance can work. You hear about every trading guru or whatever says the same things, that you need to do this, you need to do that. But weird things can work in market. I've seen people make money in markets in so many different ways, and it comes down to knowing yourself and how you can maintain your own conviction. And really, with that, there are very few things that really change the game. I always talk about game changers, like COVID. You might be in a trade and COVID comes along. Listen, you have to get out, or you have to reevaluate. But those things come every few years. I can name in my career a handful of them: the financial crisis, the Eurozone debt crisis, Brexit, occasional US election, COVID. So it's extraordinarily rare. The message there is that your conviction shouldn't be broken by most things that happen in the world. So again, the key message is really, it's that mental side. You have to visualize when you get into a trade. If you expect something to go up 1,000 pips, to visualize that along your journey, as I hold this, I'm going to experience so much pain along this. You think about the end, I'm going to make a whole bunch of money. But don't think about it in every dollar. Think, I'm going to have to eat some deep retracements in this. I'm going to have severe doubt in this trade as it goes along. People will tell me that this trade is wrong. People I trust. But your conviction has to be stronger than that. And
visualize that pain, and that's what you need for the market, for the gains. Now, I promised I'd give you some of my ideas, and again, you can't borrow my conviction. And saying these 4, I'll give you 4, and I believe probably 2 out of the 4 will be wrong, and they'll be painful for me, and I'll lose money. But you have to make money big on the ideas that you have that are right. So the first one is AI. AI is everywhere right now. People are making trades on Microsoft and NVIDIA thinking they'll be the winners in AI. They're very expensive. But I think the simple trade on AI is just buy everything. Corporate margins will improve. Companies will make more money, by and large, all of them. And we'll see a bull market really for the rest of this decade as companies cut costs with fewer employees, and they can do the same thing. And those margins will expand, and inflation will come down, and that is the absolute total conviction in that trade. There will also be huge opportunities in places like Africa in the green transition. In mining especially, I think copper is my deepest conviction on that trade. Everything about the green transition needs more and more copper. In Canada, for instance, it takes 15 years to open a mine. So the price of copper can go up 10 times, and there's no supply to meet the demand. And you can see right now, every mine that's going to come online in the next 7 years, because it already has to be in the process. So the money that's to be made in the green transition and the investments that are made are huge. Energy, something that's very interesting here in South Africa. I think there's a deep misunderstanding of energy in the world right now, how much oil we need. For instance, if China were to replace all of its coal with diesel-fired power, that would be 50% more global oil demand in the world. There is so much energy that's needed. So any source of energy right now is absolutely crucial. And finally, for this year, the US consumer is holding up, and this has been my strong conviction trade already this year, and the US dollar has done very well. The true US superpower isn't the 15 aircraft carriers they have or the nuclear arsenal. It's the 30-year fixed mortgage. Americans have absolute certainty on their mortgage levels. They don't change for 30 years. And we're just coming out of a period where they have more and more and more to spend. The power of the American consumer, it's unbreakable. And the US will continue to stay strong this year. And that's my highest conviction there. I believe eventually when the US dollar does crack, it will be a great trade in emerging markets, for instance, and commodities. But for now, the dollar is staying strong and the US consumer will stay strong right through the end of the year. In 2024, I think that could change, but that is the trade there. So, quick recap there. And listen, I'm happy to take a couple questions. I've got a few minutes if anybody has a question, and we'll talk about financial markets. Sure, over here. And if not, I'm at a booth just across the way there. Always happy to talk about markets and financial markets. We've got the US CPI report coming up today, and I think that's going to be a big one as well.
Yeah. Hi, Adam. Thanks very much for your talk. Really enjoyed it. My question might be almost two sides of the same coin, and I think you alluded to it a bit in your presentation. But what I want to know is, at what point do you decide that your conviction has not played out and you exit your trade? And then on the other side, at what point are you convinced that your conviction has played out fully and maybe your trade has overrun itself, like you saw with the Canadian dollar, it's overrun itself, and then you exit the trade before it turns and goes the other way and book your profit basically?
Great questions. Number one, the second question first. One of the, I think, the really great keys, and I could do a whole presentation on this or a whole day on this, is sentiment. You know, a lot of what you look for, a lot of people look for things that reinforce their views in terms of Twitter or wherever they're getting their information from. You try to look for that euphoria in a trade, or that, even in yourself, you start to feel that greed, and if you can recognize, I'm just thinking about where I'm going to spend all this money, it's often a cue that you need to be a little bit more cautious or take a little bit off the table, at least in my case. Sorry, remind me, what was the first part of that question again? How to know you're wrong, right?
When you're wrong, yeah.
Well, first you have to manage risks. I mean, as you're scaling in and out. So as you lose money, you got to protect yourself. Like I always say, number one thing to make money in markets is to stay in markets. There is always another trade. Something will come around where everything lines up just perfectly. So you're looking to get you want a good entry, right? So you're trying to find that fear in markets when you're getting in. With these trades, or the trades I mentioned earlier, you're going to be looking for like game changers. And it has to be a real game changer. It's not, look at this year for instance. We started out the year, everybody's talking about a recession. We're in a recession right now. It's a recession. And then February comes around. Inflation. Oh, now the Fed's going to 6%. Get out of it, sell everything. Then March comes around. Banks start failing. Some of the biggest bank failures in the U.S. history. Where's the market? S&P 500's up 8%. NASDAQ's up 20%. Those aren't game changers, even though there's people screaming at you that everything's falling apart because fear sells. Fear's what gets attention. So the conviction trade, the hardest part is staying in and understanding what you're listening to and how much fear there is out there. So I hope that gives you a bit of an idea. Anyone else? We're basically out of time, and I'm happy to talk over at my booth there, just straight across that way. But thank you very much.